I'm gonna go ahead and start pulling the fuel tank off of this thing. Go ahead and take the airbox lid off. And then we can take these two bolts off the boot, loosen the boot, and then there will be a crankcase vent. Of course, you got to take the fender bolts out. They run all the way down through the tank as well. One of them is missing over here, so that won't be too hard. Once you get that out, you can fold these up. It makes it easier to get the tank out from under the front fender. It's a little bit of a tight fit. You don't want to take a chance at cracking these plastics because these are kind of vintage at this point, and most of them are cracked, so they're kind of worth something to be in good condition. Got the clamp loose, pull the airbox out. Drain hose is surprisingly empty. Once you get the nut off there, you can just slide it out like that. It's connected to a fuel pump right under the front fender. It's connected to the fuel pump. We'll have to disconnect it there, and then we should be able to pull all that out with the tank. There's going to be 4 bolts, 2 on each side right here on the fenders. You want to take those out each side so it'll allow you and take the fuel cap off so it'll allow you to lift this up as high as possible. That gives you the room to slide the fuel tank out from underneath. We got the fuel tank out. There's also a clamp going around the frame right here that those hoses go through. So if you want to pull it out like this, you have to disconnect that so this will slide through. All right, now we can get to the carburetor. You can go ahead and pull off these 2 vent hoses. There's 1 on each side. Just lay that back. When you pull this vent off here, not a bad idea to stick a towel or something, rag or something in there so that you don't drop anything in there. And we can take this nut off. Take the fuel inlet hose off here. As far as the throttle cable, we're going to go ahead and loosen up this clamp because you have to get the carburetor out of there to be able to get to the bolts that are holding the throttle cable. We'll go ahead and loosen this up, and then we'll break the carburetor loose from the boot just by rocking it up just like that. We've got the carburetor pulled up out of there. We're going to take this fuel line off, take these 4 bolts off to pull the throttle cable off, and then the choke cable right here is kind of a pain to get to, but we can get that out. We've got that fuel line off so we can pull the carburetor outside the machine here. You see it is on Mikuni carbs, so that's original, which is a good thing. Most people, your average Joes, they would replace this carburetor with some Amazon junk. Please quit doing that. Just clean the carburetor, learn how to adjust it and stuff so we can quit throwing away OEM carbs. There are a few reasons that you should, like if you break off the ear on the float valve or something like that, something that just makes it not worth fixing. But there's no reason to throw away a carb just because it's dirty and you don't know how to clean it and adjust it. My God, we have got smelly gas everywhere. But once you get that cable disconnected, you can then take an 8mm wrench, take this nut off, and then the cable will pull out of there. We've slid the boot up on the choke cable here, and now we're taking out the choke plunger. Got some carbon on the bottom of it, but it looks like it's functioning the way it's supposed to. Needle tip is still there. Now we've got the carburetor off, we can dump all the smelly ass gas out of it. And then I'll show you how to go through these things. We've got the carburetor off the machine. It's right here. You can see it's filthy on the outside, probably filthy inside too. I want to see a couple things from the outside before we even start taking it apart. I'm gonna try this to make this as informative of a video as I can, because a lot of people have issues with carburetors and they just don't understand them. So each one that I'm gonna do on this channel, I'll try to explain how that specific carburetor works and things to look out for. As far as the idle screw, it's right here. If you turn it clockwise, it presses on this, raises it up, opens the butterfly to let more air and fuel through. That will speed up your idle. And if you go counterclockwise, it'll lower this screw right here, let that come down more, close the butterfly more, and it'll slow down your idle. Your air fuel mixture screw is right here on this one. Sometimes you'll have it right here or right here. But on most of the ATVs that still have carburetors, it's going to be right here on the bottom. The way you adjust that it's tapered on the end and it goes through a passage. So when you loosen it or go counterclockwise, that screw moves out and the taper opens up a bigger hole for more fuel, or if you have an air screw, more air to move through. That only controls the idle. So we'll go ahead and do the air fuel mixture screw first. You want to get a thin flat blade screwdriver so you don't tear up the threads on the outside or break the housing. You want to turn it in slowly, quarter turn at a time, counting the turns. There's half a turn, 1 turn, 1.5 turns, about 1 3/4 turns. Now we can remember that when we set it back up, we know that that was the baseline where it was at before. Then we can take it all the way out of the machine. Remember 1 3/4 turns on that. Turn it over like that. Here's the mixture screw. You can see this end is tapered. It's still there, it's not broken off, so that's good, and that's what meters the fuel through. So when you loosen it up, the screw backs out a little bit, lets more fuel or more air through, depending on if it's a fuel screw or an air screw. And to explain that, if you had a lean mixture, that means that your machine is running on little fuel. It needs more fuel. It's starving for fuel, so it's lean fuel. So if it was getting too much fuel in idle, it was smoking or stumbling, you could turn that screw clockwise, you know, a quarter turn or half a turn to get it to idle a little smoother. Likewise, if it was running lean, like most of them do in idle, you could back it out a quarter turn, half turn, depending on how far out you are. You never want to go more than 3 turns. You have to go more than 3 turns. You're needing to let so much more extra fuel in that you actually need a bigger pilot jet to make up that difference, so you can run your mixture screw at about 1 turn to 2 turns out. If you have to go any further than that, you need a bigger pilot jet. And the reason for that is the screw is held in by spring tension on the threads. If you get past 3 turns out, it gets so loose that it will actually vibrate and move, possibly fall out while it's running, and then you will have a lean mixture because you're sucking air in here. Now, once you get that mixture screw out in the spring, most of them usually have a washer and an O-ring just like this. That'll seal against the casting of the carburetor. It goes on spring, washer, O-ring. They get stuck in there most of the time. You just get a pick and you can pick it out of there. Try not to tear up the threads. And it'll go together like that, because when you put it in there, that O-ring seals against the carburetor body to not let air leak through, so it'll go in like that. And go ahead and set that aside. Now we can pull our bowl off. These screws look to be in good condition, and they're pretty stuck, so I'm going to go ahead and get my impact driver and not even round these off. I was kind of hoping that these were already rounded off so I could show you guys how to get them out when they're rounded off. But if you get a nice impact driver, if you have a nice fresh screw, just use it. It's so much easier. See how much easier that breaks free? If it's really stuck, you can just tap the top with a mallet and it will break it free. See, that one is a little bit stripped out. There's multiple ways you can do this. You can either get a chisel and stick it right here into the side of the screw and tap on it to get it to break free. I usually like to grab a pair of needle nose pliers, a good stout pair with good grip, and you can usually grab it and break it free that way too. We're going to try the needle nose real quick. This one is a good candidate for the chisel because there's not much room out here to get the pliers or a pair of channel locks to clamp onto it. So we're going to lay this down, and we're going to want to hit it, turn it counterclockwise obviously. So I'm going to put the chisel kind of angled towards, keep it away from the carburetor casting. Get a little indentation put in there, then angle it a little bit. I think it just broke free there. And it's free. Easy as that. You can replace that screw if you want to. I probably will. I think I've got some extra screws laying around. Any guesses on what this is going to look like in here? I bet it's very varnished. It's my guess. It might not be though. It might be pretty clean. It's pretty clean, but this is the main issue, and this is usually what partially clogs jets. You can see there's a little bit of built up varnish right there. But see how there's kind of a green color? It's not real dirty in here. There's a little bit of dirt in the bottom of the bowl, which is to be expected. But there's a lot of green color, and that's varnishing fuel. So-ring appears to be okay. It's pretty flat, but it's probably reusable. We can clean it up, make it seal better. The float is stuck, so that would be why it's not starting, or part of why it's not starting. It is so varnished that the float is actually stuck, and that's making it obviously not gonna get fuel in. But the main issue is usually the pilot jet right here, down in there. It's usually clogged up, and the main jet, it's bigger, it's got a bigger orifice. But if you get varnish, sticky fuel, or any kind of dirt and stuff in there, dirt particles, leaves, it can plug that big hole too. The pilot jet, to know if it's clogged, if your machine will start with the choke on, but as soon as you shut the choke off, it will not run. That's because this jet is clogged. And the reason for that is when you pull the choke, you're pulling the plunger out of this hole right here, allowing extra fuel. So you're pretty much bypassing this jet. It's running off that extra fuel until you shut it off, and then it's trying to pull the fuel from here only, and it's not enough to keep the machine running. So if you have that issue, which is most of the time what the issue is, that's the first thing to clog up. It's because that jet is clogged. You need to take it out, clean it out, and the whole passage through. It comes to the mixture screw here. It comes from this jet to the mixture screw, so you can clean out here, and then it'll come through in your actual carburetor body here. See, the mixture screw goes in there, so it's gonna be a little hole right here at the bottom that it'll actually spray into the bore here. I'm gonna go ahead and take the float out here. I'm gonna take the float pin out, which is right here. You can tap it a little bit right here to get it started. Don't get too crazy though, because you can break these ears off and that ruins your carburetor. That's why you should replace carburetor, not because the jets are clogged or anything like that. If you break a part of the casting, it probably needs replaced. Then once you get it started, you can pull that pin out. Try to get this float out without like that, and that will allow me to get right to the float needle, which you see sets right there. It has a spring right on the top. You can press on it, and it has a spring that presses out on the end to help it seal. Let's see if we can get this out of there without. You see the green color around it too. Okay, we got it out. Let's make sure the spring works. So the spring was stuck. I don't know if you can see that now. It's free. The end of the float looks okay, or the end of the needle looks okay. That seals on this orifice down here. So we need to clean that up, make sure it's nice and smooth. And we need to make sure this needle, we need to clean that up, make sure it's smooth if we're gonna reuse it, which I think I am on this one. So now we got that out, I can show you how the float works. The fuel comes in right here through this tube, comes into this hole right here. And we saw right there that that float and needle seal right here. So if the carb's hanging like this, that float, the bowl fills with fuel, pushes that float up, and that closes off the needle, telling it, hey, we don't need any more fuel right now. Likewise, if it gets stuck open, it just keeps dumping fuel in. And it either, if this is clogged up, which most of them are, that's supposed to let it drain out. It's an overflow, and it'll drain out this pipe, and that one looks completely, that may be open. But anyways, yeah, it drains out of there. If that is clogged up, the only place that fuel has to go is to run up through these jets into the bore, and then it runs down into your intake, through the valves, down into the cylinder, washes past your rings, get into the crankcase, make your fuel level or your oil level come up, and make it run super rich, stink, all that stuff. So if you have one that's sputtering, blowing black smoke, idle's rough, pull your dipstick out, check the oil, see if it's high, smell it, see if there's gas in it, because that's what's happened. You'll need to clean, either put a new needle and seat in, make sure your float operates all right, or clean it all up, get it sealing, and put it back together. We're gonna go ahead and take the seat out now. I hope you can see all this. It's hard to know if I have the camera focused on it, but the head of these bolts also get varnish in them, and it makes it hard to get a screwdriver down in there fully to seat. But we'll take this off. That just holds the seat down, and it also guides the float bowl when you put it on there, this tower right here that I was talking about slides through there. Some of them don't have that, and when people put the bowl on, they'll get it crooked or backwards and break this off, and then fuel will just always leak out there, so you just ruined another carburetor, or the bowl anyways, unless you got a spare. Now we can pull that seat out. Some people grab it like this. I don't like doing that unless I'm replacing the seat, because these pliers will damage and scratch the inside. You can grab it right here lightly, kind of wiggle it, just like that. Check the O-ring here, because if it's bad, the fuel will bypass the float and leak into here, and it'll overflow. It'll run rich, all the same symptoms. This looks actually kind of clean down here on the inside. Probably can't see it, I'm sure, but it's green and dirty down in there, but it's savable. We can save this seat. I can clean it up. What I use is a piece of cork. It's a stick of it, or it's actually wood or cork or something, but I'll put lapping compound on the end of it, and I've carved it to fit those seats perfectly. Put it in there, spin it, clean that up, and then if it's dirty out here, I'll put some Scotch-Brite in there and just kind of spin it around to clean that up, spray it out real good. Let's go ahead and get the main jet out. And I'll explain the main jet right now too, might as well. Anything in an idle or just barely off idle, like turning the throttle, if you turn it just a little bit, it's going to be running off of the slow jet. Anything above that, all the way up to full throttle, is going to be your main jet. So if your machine runs well and idle and just a little off idle, this is probably fine. If you go to give it gas and it goes boom, falls on its face, this is probably clogged or has fallen out, or it could be too big for whatever reason. Somebody replaced it with the wrong one, but the main jet controls anything from like a quarter throttle all the way to full throttle. So, and the pilot jet, like I said, anything from idle to just off idle, just a hair. We'll go ahead and take the main jet out. Put that off to there. I know you probably can't see through there, but if you hold them up through the light and look through it, the main jet is actually perfectly clear on this one. We're still going to spray it out and everything. Make sure it's all good. You have your emulsion tube that meets down to it, and then your needle jet, which it comes in from the top side. I'll explain that to you when we get to it. Now we can go to the top side. Make sure you're not putting pressure on anything that you can break or damage. We'll get the impact driver, same thing with these. Alright, got a little smaller pair of vice grips here with a little better teeth. Get them adjusted right to probably get a better bite on it. And then we'll just spin that, and you can see the bolt broke free without tearing anything up, without hammering on it, or having to put a groove in it from having to hit it with a punch. So I always try that first if I can get pliers in there. But go ahead and take this apart. And go ahead and take this off. Sometimes you got to give it a little love tap. And we'll pull that out, and the slide comes with it along with the vacuum diaphragm. I don't know why it was so hard to think of that, but you can carefully peel that off because it stuck to it a little bit. But once you get that off, you can inspect everything. The diaphragm is okay. It's not torn anywhere, anything like that. That's
some of these situations back in your defense again. They have a good defense. They're playing well defensively. So again, understand all complementary aspects of the game.
We'll clean this up. Everything looks okay with it. I'm sure it slides fine and everything. You can see all the dirt in there, but yeah, it slides nice and fine. The diaphragm's fine, so we'll clean that up. That's savable. We pulled the needle out of there. This is the needle jet. It sets down in this slide here. It goes down like that. Some of them, on like mini bikes and stuff, the throttle is actually pulling this up, but on this one, it is not part of the throttle. It actually gets pulled up when the vacuum increases, when you're needing more air pulling through, it'll raise up with the variation. It's got a spring on top, but it'll open up. If you look in there, If you get on the throttle, it will open up and allow more air in. Also, the needle raises with that and allows more fuel in to meet your needs when you get up to a higher RPM. And that's pulling through the main jet. So when you get up to a higher RPM, remember it pulls from here. That's why the needle's in there. And this one has a plastic washer on the top. That's for the spring to stay aligned to and have something to push on. There's also, you can see on here, an E-clip that snaps out of there. Looks like this one's adjustable. It's on the middle groove, which is stock for this. If you get on the gas and you have a little bit of a hesitation when you're getting on it, you can make minor adjustments with your needle valve or with your needle jet. You can raise this clip, here's my slide, up one spot. You raise it up one spot so that the needle sets further down, and that will make your mixture leaner when you're at that spot. So when you hit the throttle, it'll open this up, let more air in, and that needle will be hanging down further, so it's letting less fuel in, so it'll be leaner. Most of the time you'll have a lean bog where you hit the throttle and go, and then it'll pull out of it. If you lower the clip on here, that will raise the needle up in this slide. So when you hit the gas, this is opened up, allowing more fuel, and the needle is higher up into the slide, so it's getting more fuel with that air, and that'll get rid of the hesitation on some things, if that's what the issue is. So we've got everything out of here. We're going to leave the idle screw in there. No need to take it out, really. If you wanted to sonic clean it, put it in a sonic cleaner. I'm not going to. I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way, which is my own way. You can take this out if you're putting in a sonic cleaner to make sure that nothing gets damaged, no O-rings or anything. Almost forgot to take the pilot jet out, and it's probably clogged up. Make sure you get a screwdriver that's not pushing on the... I'm going to turn it to the right just a little bit. That's one of the small style, and it is stuck in there from... The threads have some varnish and everything on them. I'll let that WD-40 set in there for a second. Right, get a little better of a screwdriver here, because you can break the... These are brass, so you can break... let me go to the main jet and show you. These are brass, so you can twist it, and actually if it's stuck so much, you can break the ear off of this, and it makes it hard to get them out of there. So you got to be pretty careful. Usually, a carburetor that's not as varnished or whatever, they're pretty easy to get out, but just make sure you're pressing firmly and you're in there, and it'll usually crack loose. Alright, got that out. I'm gonna look at the light. That is completely plugged. Yep. I can't even blow through it. I tried to blow through it. Can't blow through it. You can see on the bottom here some grime and build up. It's completely plugged. What you can do about that, one, take contact cleaner, spray it through here. If it does not spray through, and get a piece of wire. Let's see if I have anything. I don't know if I have anything. Piece of wire, cut it off, and then you can pull an individual strand out and run that through it to force the blockage out. That makes sure you get it completely clean, and the wire will not damage inside of here. If you use something like a welder tip cleaner or something, it's actually going to make this bigger inside because you're going to be wallering it out. So make sure you use something brass, or I've even pulled out strands of like a small wire brush and use those. You just want to get this completely clear. And when you do that, you also want to blow this out, compressed air, carburetor cleaner, whatever you got to do to make sure that you can blow it into here. It will come out here. You can blow it into here, and it will come out in the bore where it's supposed to. Make sure that whole system is unblocked, because there's small holes inside there, inside the actual cavity too. You can see this is where the pilot jet goes into the bore. But if you look right here, you can see that it'll be just like this right here, but it's going forward. That's going to this pilot jet. So it gets pulled through there, works through the pilot jet or the slow jet, however far you have it open, and that allows whatever metered amount of fuel to come into the bore through a small hole that that needle seats up against, and that's what controls your idle mixture. Likewise with this, I'm not going to take the motion tube out of this one. There's no reason to. Just make sure it's clean inside there. Make sure that it sticks out up here like it's supposed to, that the needle goes into it. And on the top side, there's not really a whole lot to worry about besides this jet right here. And we'll clean all this out, make sure it's nice and smooth. Don't damage any of the surface that the slide slides on to make it rougher or it'll stick. We'll clean all that out. And then I'm gonna soak it, clean out all the outside too, get all this dirt, scrub it off, make it nice and look brand new again. It's amazing how nice you can make a carburetor that's in rough shape if you just put a little bit of effort into it. So I'm gonna start working on that. I'm taking this jet on the top side out.
I think they're just going to pound it a few times.
It's completely clear, which I was sure that it was because it's a very large jet. I'll spray through it. I'll spray through it and make sure it's completely clear, but it's that one you don't have to worry about as much as the other ones. Okay, I'm gonna get this thing cleaned up and then I'll come back when we're putting it back together and show you how to adjust everything and make sure that everything's good. All right, we're back. We've got this cleaned up a lot better than it was. It's not perfect, but I don't have a sonic cleaner here, so we've got it looking 10 times better than it did. We're gonna go ahead and start putting it back together. I'm gonna start with the pilot jet because I want to show you what I was talking about with cleaning it out. I've got this brass piece that was pulled out of a wire brush, a brass wire brush, and you can run that. This pilot jet was completely blocked. Yep, I feel it there. I just felt it break the blockage, so now we know that is completely free. You can spin around there a little bit. It's a brass wire, so it isn't going to tear it up. When you get it clean, you should be able to blow through it and hold it up to a light and see right through it, which I can, so I know this one's completely clear. I'll go ahead and blow compressed air through it, which I already did through every passage in here too, just to make sure there's nothing in there, make sure they're all free. We'll go ahead and put the pilot jet back in. Don't have to kill these, just snug them up. And go ahead and put the main jet in. The motion tube's already in. I ended up pulling it out when I was charging my camera, and it was fine. The main jet, I'm not sure if you can see through it. You can see there, yep, it's perfectly clear. I've already blown it out and cleaned it out. It wasn't bad anyways. Go ahead and put that in. Same thing, don't gotta kill it, just snug it up. Make sure your motion tube is showing. Some of them have a raised side, so you can make sure that's oriented the right direction. Okay, so we've got the main jet, pilot jet in. We can go ahead and put our mixture screw in now. Make sure that I use a little bit of Scotch-Brite to clean a little bit of the carbon off the end of it. Now it's nice and shiny brass again. Make sure your O-ring, washer, spring, we can go ahead and put that in. We're gonna go all the way until it lightly seats. Remember, it's 1 3/4 out. We're gonna go 1 turn out. Now that the pilot jet's clean, it may be a little richer, so we'll go 1 turn out and we'll adjust it after the engine warms up and it's running and we can achieve our highest idle. I'll show you how to do that. Okay, we've lightly seated. half turn, 1 turn. And we can stop there. We didn't touch our idle screw, so we know that it's pretty close, or it should run at least. We can fine tune that after we do the mixture screw. We can go ahead and put our, I'm going to show you how I clean these seats. First I'm going to put a little WD-40 in there to kind of break anything down a little bit. That. Actually need a smaller chunk. Twist it up a bit. Shove it down in there. Just spin it around. Alright, I'm spinning the Scotch-Brite around in here a little bit. You can see all the carbon and the corrosion and stuff that comes out of there. I don't know if you can see in there. It's better, but it's not perfect yet. We want it completely clean to take no chances. Alright, we've got the seat all cleaned out, looking like new. We'll go ahead and, I've lubricated the O-ring just a little bit. We'll go ahead and gently press it back in, spin it just a little bit so that O-ring doesn't tear. And go ahead and put this bracket back in there. Doesn't hurt to use a little bit of Scotch-Brite on this and clean it up a little bit so it goes in easier. It doesn't have any dirt or burrs on it. Give it some light little lubrication there. Make sure it goes through the float there. Press it in like that. Make sure the other side's lined up so you don't break the ear off of it. Got it through. I'm going to lightly tap it to seat it. Just like that. Now that we have the float installed and the float pin installed, we can check the operation of it. We turn it over, it should open up, and you can blow. Sorry. Turn it over, should open up. You see it moves freely. Blow air through here. It should, when it's hanging down, it should come. Air should blow through freely, which it does. It should seal about right there, even with the surface of the carburetor bowl here. You see it's free there, and the needle starts touching about even with the surface right there. So that's shutting the fuel off. So when we hold it up to there, you shouldn't be able to blow through this vent here. It should block it off. It's completely blocking it off when it gets level with the surface, so that's good. That's what we want. At this point, we can go ahead and put the bowl back on. It's all cleaned out, lubricated that gasket a little bit. All the dirt's out of the bottom. We'll tighten up our, we'll make sure our screw down here is tight so we don't have, if it was loose, that would have ran fuel right out when we hooked it up. We'll go ahead and make sure that's tight. I made sure I could blow through this. I couldn't. I also ran that little wire through the hole in it to make sure it was free, so when if it does overflow, it can run out of this instead of down into the engine. Now we can go ahead and mount this back on. Okay, we've got the bowl installed. After you do that, it's not a bad idea to shake it a little bit. You can hear the float in there moving up and down. Make sure it isn't rubbing up against this and getting stuck. Sounds like it's moving freely. Now we can move to the top side of the slide. All right, we've got the slide here. We know there's no tears. We got it all cleaned up. We know the needle does not need to be moved unless there needs to be a jetting change. But we know that's not the case. I'm gonna clean this little bit of stuff off the needle here. We know that's not the case, so we can go ahead and install it how it is, and then we can adjust it later if it needs cleaned up further, or adjusted further, sorry. So we'll go ahead and put the needle in there. I'm actually gonna leave it right there. put this collar on before we drop it all the way down in there. If you look on the diaphragm here, there's right here there's a little ear that sets in this little ear in the gasket surface. Go ahead and orient it that way. Slide, but make sure the needle goes down into the emulsion tube. You see down in there, right into the emulsion tube. Make sure this top side is setting down on the gasket surface, which it does nicely. Got lucky, some of them do not set so nice. This top side has an ear that goes over that gasket, so make sure you orient that correctly. Go ahead and put the spring in, make sure that collar's aligned down there. Then we'll put the screws in the top and we'll be done with this carburetor. All right, we got the bolts in the top. So we know what in the hell? We got the bolts in the top, so this carburetor's done. Make sure your slide works as it should. Make sure you can hear the float moving. We know the mixture screws are 1 turn out. So when we go, once we get it running and idling, we can adjust that and the idle speed. I'm not going to record reinstalling it because it's the same process, but it's taking it off, just do it in reverse. One thing I will mention though is while you have it off, it's a good time to check your boots. This one and the one that goes on the rear for cracks, tears where you'll be getting air leaks. Make sure there's not a bunch of dirt in your intake. This one's pretty clean. And when you put this back on there, make sure that you get this completely centered in that boot and all the way in before you tighten it up, or you're going to have an air leak and it's going to be sucking dirt in there. You're going to make it run really lean. Back on this machine, we know that it is clean and set up correctly. Now we need to start the machine and see if it starts. There may be another issue like a bad fuel pump or something not getting fuel to the carburetor itself, but let's just see if it starts first. Got the key on, choke out, the petcock is on reserve, kill switch is on, or it's in the run position rather. Let's crank and see what happens. So sometimes those are vacuum operated fuel pumps on these, and there's a lot of fuel lines. So sometimes on these it takes a little cranking to get fuel to the actual carburetor. You have to prime it up. I'll crank it on a little more. I'm going to go ahead and put a battery charger on it to keep the battery in good condition, but I'll go ahead and off the video I'll crank on it a little more and see if I can get it primed up. If it doesn't start, I'll come back on and we can chase down why. I've turned it over enough that it should have primed up by now. It does start for a couple seconds and then die. I didn't get it on film, but because I think the fuel pump's having issues, but we can confirm that it is a fuel issue. We're gonna spray some contact cleaner into the intake here and see if it hits off that. If it starts right up, then we'll know immediately it's a fuel delivery issue. And since our carburetor we know is good, then it has to be either the fuel pump or something with the petcock restricting fuel flow. So I'm gonna spray a little bit of this, just a little bit in the intake. This is a little bit of a fire hazard if you have a backfire, so just either don't do this or be prepared with a fire extinguisher and stuff in case that does happen. We're gonna pull the choke on. Okay, so air filter and the air box cover back on so that we can keep the airflow the way it's going to be when the machine's being used. And we'll go ahead and see if it'll start anymore. Kind of idling a little fast because of the contact cleaner we sprayed on that air leak. Let's see how it runs. See if it still crackles and coughs a little bit at an idle. The idle is hanging around, and that's an indicator of either your idle is set too high, so your mixture screw is not controlling the idle. You're actually keeping it idling just because your idle screw is turned in so high. So it's either that or that air leak is causing the idle to hang around. Let's back the idle off and see what happens. It'll probably stumble and die, I'm sure, which would make me more sure that air leak scenario. Let's slow it down just a bit. Now let's see if the idle still hangs around a little bit. Comes back down a little better. Still sounds stumbly though. Let's see. Yeah, there's a definite air leak right there. We're gonna have to fix that before we can get this thing running perfect. For purely shits and gigs purposes, I went ahead and pulled on the fuel pump here. You can see it up there. The line that comes in on the front side, that's your vacuum line or your prime line from the carburetor. The top line that's still plugged in, that comes from the petcock, so that's your fuel inlet line. And the one that I've taken the hose off is what goes to the carburetor to fill the bowl. And I pulled that hose off there. I'm gonna crank it over just to see if we have fuel. I've put a spare fuel line on there. Let's see if we have anything when we crank this. So you can see there that it is pumping fuel while the machine's running. All right, so we just tested the flow of the fuel pump and we know that it's putting out plenty of fuel. This should keep the machine running, but we have a lean condition. We know the carburetor is completely clean. All the jets are cleaned out. The mixture screw, I went ahead and backed it out to 2 turns to make sure that it wasn't an adjustment with the mixture screw. So at this point we can be confident we sprayed and found an air leak. That's what's causing our lean issue, and that's why we can't get it to run correctly. So we need to replace that air leak and then adjust our carburetor, and it should run very smoothly. At this point I've taken the airbox out and pulled the carburetor out of the boot. We need to take out that bolt, and there's one just like it on the other side to remove the intake boot there. I've already got the socket in it set up, ready to go. Well, that wasn't very tight. That one was tight. I don't see any breaks in it at all. It's dirty. We can clean that off, but there's no obvious cracks, so it had to have been leaking. Either it was warped up here, or remember that bolt was loose. So it could have not been held down there all the way, or be a little bit warped. Just tightening it up may have helped, but we're gonna go ahead and clean this all up, make sure this is flat, and then we'll go from there. So we're looking at the cylinder surface down here where that bolted up to, where the gasket inside sets. And you can see up around here, if you follow the light, that area you can see has black rub marks from the gasket. But if you get down to the bottom about right here, it does not. It looks like it was leaking a little bit there, and that would be consistent with where I was spraying. Cleaned off the gasket surface. Gonna go ahead and reinstall the new boot, and then we'll put the carburetor back in, tighten everything up, and check for an air leak. The belt's fine, the clutch is working all right, everything like that.